Okay, so keeping in step with talking about myth in terms of past and psychology today, I'm going to look at Irish myth in the context of modern media, and particularly just in terms of Game of Thrones. Now, I haven't read all the books, so if I'm getting things wrong, of course, let me know. I'm just largely going off the TV series. I'm going to look at maybe some of the Irish flavour, these Irish influences, and the Irish teams involved in the Game of Thrones series. And I suppose just to emphasise, my interest isn't really lying with Game of Thrones, the Game of Thrones fan kingdom, or whatever. There's enough people on that. My interest in particular is in Irish myth and modern Irish society and modern Irish people. Now, naturally, you might feel like I'm reaching with some of this stuff. It might seem wildly speculative. If so, then tell me where I'm going wrong and correct me. You know. So let's get going. And I suppose the first thing is probably the most obvious thing, and probably the most meaningless. It's shot in Ireland, partly. You know, some of the scenes which are in the north in the show are shot in Northern Ireland and also in Iceland. So there's one thing, and that's it. I'm only messing. So we'll start with just, I suppose, the most magical characters in both the show and both in the Irish myths. And in the show, I think it's a bit different in the books, but in the show you have the others, or the White Walkers, and they come from north of the wall, or from the north. And in Irish mythology you also have the Tua Di Danann, and they are also said to have come from the north, to have landed in Ireland, or the northwest. So both arrive from the north. Both are also described as beautiful creatures. White, the White Walkers given in the name, and the Tua Di Danann are also known as the Shining Ones. Now, the next one is, it's not a direct similarity, but it's a sort of juxtaposition of common powers. Whereas the White Walkers have the ability to give life to the dead, the Tua Di Danann have the ability to grant everlasting youth to people. You know, so there's a kind of play on the power over life and a play on the delay or a power over death, common to both of them. It also appears that the others have the ability to warg, that is to go into the mind of another animal or another being and control that from there, see things from their perspective. Also, the Tua Di Danann have the ability to shapeshift, which is to continuously or consistently change your shape, change your appearance. Much interestingly, much like Melisandre does in the show, you know, she has the charm, and once she takes that off, she is a much, much, much older woman, you know, in the show at least. And in Ireland, of course, in one of the myths, you have the Red Lady, which would be Melisandre. Now, we'll come back to the Tuatha Dé Danann in a little bit down the line, but now we're just going to look at the two Brans, namely Bran Stark from Game of Thrones and the character of Bran in Irish mythology. Now, one of the common features of Game of Thrones is Bran's adventure, or Bran's departure from Winterfell as he goes north beyond the wall to meet the three-eyed raven. Now, in Irish mythology, Bran is said to go on a voyage. He goes on a voyage looking for the land of women, an island of women, just women. And they go through similar experiences as they both embark on their own individual voyages or their both individual journeys. for instance, Bran in Game of Thrones meets the three-eyed raven, who introduces Bran through the weirwoods to a way to journey through time, or to see through time, travel through time, and also to see things in a different perspective. This is similar to the Irish mythology, where Bran is introduced to the god Manannán MacLír, who in poetic verse speaks of the different ways, it speaks to Bran about different ways you can see things. He's saying that while Bran sees just water on the sea, Manannán sees different things. He sees flowers and stuff coming from that. So both characters, both Brans from Irish mythology and Game of Thrones, they're both introduced to godlike characters who introduce them to different perspectives and different ways of looking at the world. And also, when the Irish Bran in mythology comes back to Ireland, he feels like he's been gone for a year, but upon speaking to the inhabitants of the island, they say that they have heard of Bran through stories that have been passed down, and that Bran seems to have been gone for 300 years. Now, in looking at Game of Thrones, it's interesting as well, because there's a Bran that goes back through all of the history of the North and of Winterfell and the whole Game of Thrones kingdom. You know, there's Brans at different stages and different times. There's also a theory that Bran of the current show, or the Bran at the current times, could be the Bran of all of those different generations. But needless to say, whichever way that is, there's also, you see this through Bran's seeming ability to be able to communicate with people from the past while he's looking at events that have occurred previously. So there's a weird perspective, there's a shift in the perspective, a distorted view on time occurs to both Brans, as part of their own journey or adventure. Now, Game of Thrones, it's loaded with not just references to crows or ravens, but also characters who call themselves crows or ravens. You have the three-eyed raven, who we just talked about, and also you have the Watchers on the Wall, or the Night's Watch, who are called crows by the people north of the Wall. And old Irish stories and old Irish myths, there's a fair amount of ravens or crows involved in that as well. There also is in other mythologies of other countries, but for now I'm not looking at that. I'm just looking at the Irish context, and one of the gods is the Morrigan or the Morrigu, and she is the crow of battle. She's a war goddess. So if you look at what she would have been doing, she would have been protecting Irish people, protecting the land. And then you look at the Night's Watch in the show, or the books, they're again protecting their people and protecting the land. So you have two crows with similar roles. Now that's just a couple of words on the Children of the Forest as well. They were the dominant people of the land until this is in Game of Thrones, until the first men came and pushed them back. So now their numbers are said to have dwindled to very few, and they got pushed back to the forest, Children of the Forest. So they dwell there. They also use magic. They can communicate through the weirwood, which is the trees, the network of trees, which have faces carved into them, which they've carved into them. In Ireland as well, you see the Tuatha Dé Danann. Once men came in and dominated Ireland, these gods or these race of beings are kind of relegated to fairies, other folk, along with the others. And they get pushed back to the Shee, or the mountains, or the hills. and they dwell inside of them, you know. And also Irish history and Irish mythology is replete with the worship of trees, the veneration of trees. And just as the children of the forest communicate via trees, or can, the potential is there. In ancient Ireland, the alphabet was derived from the names of trees. So each letter of the Old Irish alphabet would have coincided with the first letter or the name of one of the trees. So as the children of the forest can communicate via the weirwoods, the Old Irish used to communicate via trees as well, as the name of the trees became the letters of the alphabet of the Old Irish. So just a little look over three of the main families. I'm going to look at the Targaryens, the Lannisters, but first the Starks. And I suppose the most striking thing from watching the show is the fact that a lot of them are redheads, you know. And if you know anything about the demographics or the geography of redheads, they're more concentrated in Ireland, Scotland, England and Wales, with Ireland and Scotland having the higher percentages. A couple of them are Irish actors as well, as far as I know. But one of the more interesting things about the Starks is the name Arya. And I'll be coming back to this again and again, because there's reason to believe that the word Arya, which is where Iran derived its name from, or Iran, the country, there's reason to suggest that Ireland or Era might have done the same thing. So Arya in Sanskrit, I believe, means honourable one, or man of high regard, or person of high esteem, you know, honourable one. Also in Ireland, the word Ari, means king. You know, so Irie land would be the land of the king. Ireland. You know, so that's interesting. Again, you might say it's nonsense and you're just stretching words or bending things to try and make them sound like something they're not, but have a look at it. I'll throw some things down when I finish this, and you can have a look and make up your own mind. But I suppose I'll keep going with that for a second, because that kind of a sound in the names crops up a good few times, the Ari. So you have Arya Stark from the north. You have Targaryen, Daenerys, Ari, and you have Varys or Varys. So the word Arya or Ari, that sound keeps popping up in Game of Thrones. And again, just to reiterate, there's a good reason to suggest that word could be kind of maybe the part of the root word of where Ireland has gotten its name. So on to the Lannisters. Again, they're all either blonde or kind of fair haired or red haired. And interestingly, there's schools of thought that believe that not only is there links between the ancient culture of the Phoenicians, but there's also schools of thought that believe that the Phoenicians may have been Irish. And one of the capital cities of Phoenicia, or for the Phoenicians, was Tyre. So someone coming from Tyre would be a Tyrian. You know, so you have Tyrion in Game of Thrones. So there's another link back to Ireland again. Again, the red hair. Tywin, again, is probably a Welsh name. Jamie as well in the show. I don't know about the books because I haven't read them. Tell me if it's the same thing. He gets his hand cut off and he gets it replaced with a gold hand. This kind of echoes the Nuada myth, who loses his hand in battle and gets it replaced with a silver hand. So on to the Targaryens, and just in particular Daenerys. Or I'll focus on just her name, and her second name as well are very interesting. You have Dan Aries, again that word, that sound is back. So if you take it apart, you have Dan, and then you looking at this through an Irish lens, you have the Tuatha Danann, which is the people of the goddess Danu, or Dan, you know. So there's a link there, and also that again, that's that sound, that Aries, you know. So Dan Aries. And you see the same effect in her second name, her family name, Targaryen. Whereas the first, again, if you split it, you have the first few letters being Tar. And then in Ireland you have Tara, the hill of Tara, which is a place where the kings meet. You know, it's an old place of revere in Ireland, where the ancient kings and the ancient gods would have assembled. And you have that in her name. So you have the place where the kings meet, and then Aryan or Garian, Targaryen. Again, you have that Ari word, Era, which is another Irish goddess, which is we're said to have gotten her name from. Era, Eri, Ari. You know, similar sounds and connoting similar things. In Sanskrit, you have it meaning honourable ones, and in Ireland it means king. The Ri sound, Ari. And again, the hair, white hair. I'm not sure if it's the same in the books. I think it's the same in the books, and the purple eyes. But in the show anyway, the Targaryens you do see, they're all blonde. You know, as were the people who are said to have created certain cultures who came from the West, you know. They're said to be blonde-haired and blue-eyed. And does that mean Ireland? Who knows, you know. But again, the colour of the hair is fair. It's in kind of in the red spectrum. It's in the blonde, on the blonde spectrum. So strawberry blonde to blonde. Stark to Targaryen. Again, and she's the mother of serpents, you know, or the mother of dragons. And in Irish history, the story of serpents or snakes, St. Patrick, how much of a saint he is whatever you want to think of that. But he's said to have gotten rid of banished the snakes from Ireland. Now, physical snakes probably never inhabited this country. But when you read a little bit, you kind of you start to notice that it said that the Druids were possibly serpent worshippers. For it said that Pythagoras learned what he knew through a Druid, and Pythagoras, Python, is a snake as well. And again, the show was heavy on, I suppose, the romance or whatever between Jon and Daenerys. And if you can look at it as Jon representing the trees or the old gods or the weirwoods or Winterfell or the North, and Dany representing or serpents or the dragons. So you have the tree and the dragon, or the tree and the serpent, and these are considered objects of extreme veneration in ancient Ireland, and you have them embodied in these two characters, two of the main characters in the show, if not the main characters. So in the show you have Daenerys, who is the mother of dragons, and in ancient Ireland you would have had the goddess Danu, who would have been the goddess of the serpents, if you're taking the Druids to mean the serpents, or the worshippers of the serpents. So in both cases you end up with a goddess or a mother of serpents or snakes. And these are just a few things that kind of popped into my head, and I've written them down years ago, but I never went back to it. I always meant to read the books, but when you're after seeing the show, it's kind of hard to get into it because you know kind of what's after happening. But I might do, because I'm sure there's probably loads of stuff, more stuff I can glean out of it. As if I was from Sweden and I looked at Game of Thrones, I'd probably be able to pick stuff that corresponds with stuff from their myths as well. Or if I was Egyptian or whatever, any kind of, well, probably any culture, Also, the word Tara means the place where kings gather. Also in Sanskrit, I think it means a star or a goddess. And I think our birth was Daenerys' the birth of dragons is kind of prophesied or said to be coming when there's a comet or a shooting star in the sky. Red comet, I think. So that's interesting. Now, people could easily say, well, like, if you look at any story, you're going to be able to take themes or whatever that are related back to other stories from other lands. So what? I'd say, yeah, exactly. So, like, if you can take themes out of probably the most popular television show of all time, and you can relate them back to examples from your own myths, number one, you're getting to like understand some of the origin or some of the influences that the author had in writing that story. But also you're getting to understand aspects of your own history and your own people. And this is the reason why I did this, because you have I don't know anyone in Ireland personally, with the exception of maybe like one person, who's actively interested in reading Irish mythology. I don't know how prevalent it is in schools. I don't even know if it's taught in schools. It was probably on the way out when I was in school, which would have been probably 20 years ago or so. I don't hear anybody ever talk about it. I'm sure if people were very well versed in it, they would be able to watch Game of Thrones and see. And the topic might have come up in conversation before, but as far as I know, it's probably on the wane, has been on the wane for decades, and it's probably been actively buried, people are probably being actively persuaded against it, if it's brought up at all in schools and stuff. So the reason why I did this is not because I'm such a huge Game of Thrones fan, because it's okay, like, it's good, but I'm a people fan, I'm my people's fan, and my history's fan as well. And you look at people who've grown up and they're taught just one aspect of their history, which involves English and Irish, what the English did, what the Irish are because of it, and the rest of it. And that's just such a small sample of Irish history. But then much of the more colourful stuff and much of the more creative and imaginative stuff is denied to people these days. But then on the other hand, what you have is they're being fed back their own history, their own myths, through media, through television, through some books if they're reading the books, through Game of Thrones, and they're lapping it up without realising I'm just being fed back what I should have already been brought up to know. And that begs another question as well, is if these same motifs and same themes keep coming up, isn't it best that we understand them so we can teach them to our next generation? We can teach them to our children. We can become the storytellers again, instead of just passively accepting somebody else's story. And again, if any of this is way out there, let me know and I won't correct it. Good luck.